All right, what's going on, people who are still up late? Welcome to a value conversation, GenX spoken word late night edition. This is a random rant. I repeat, this is a random rant. Nothing is planned. We're just doing what we're doing. Go ahead and take the music down a bit. All right. So again, folks, it is probably almost 1 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Things were on my mind. And I figured, you know what? Let me just throw down for a little bit. Like I said, nothing is planned here, folks. This is just random stuff that's going on in the world right now. And since I couldn't sleep, I figured if anybody else was up, I'd go ahead and keep y'all up as well if you want to get in on it. First and foremost, I just want to say here what I've got on. Black History Civil Rights mugshot. Let's see if I can get in front of the camera a little bit better. If anybody is watching this, can anybody name the 4 gentlemen on my shirt? I repeat, if anyone is watching, please feel free to name the 4 individuals on my shirt. Now, civil rights was something that's been on my mind a lot as of late. And that's mostly because we're seeing a lot of violations that are occurring right now that no one that we see, as far as the day-to-day Americans, appear to be making too much of a fuss about it. But then I realized something, and I think I've said this in previous shows. The issue surrounding civil rights right about now is that a majority of those who are, what's the best way to put it? The majority of the people that don't see an issue with what's going on are separated from some of the actions that occurred almost 30 or 40 years ago. Hey, Joe, cool. All right. Appreciate you dropping in, man. Thanks much for that. You are absolutely right. You see Malcolm and King. Hey, what's going on, Alicia? Malcolm, Huey, Martin, and that last person escapes a lot of folks. And I say that only because it's most likely due to, as I'm saying before, excuse me, the fact that there's almost 30-something years between the Civil Rights Acts of the mid-60s and Generation Y going on to Generation Z. So the last person is John Lewis. He was one of the folks who had marched with Martin Luther King back in the 60s. And he was prevalent in politics. And he died about 5, maybe 6 years ago, a little bit longer than that. Just a second, man. Let me put that back up for you, Joe. So again, that last guy is John Lewis. So as I was saying here, the problem, let me do one more thing. Let's show contents on stage. So give it a second. You may see the comments display here momentarily. Okay, Joe, I can see your comment also, but we'll go ahead and bring it up here. Yeah, Alicia, he was young at that time, extremely. So the issue that I see here with the civil rights aspect is that we don't have too many people who are charged about this because of being, as I said before, separated from a lot of those actions. Now, Top Cat is one of the Council of OG members. Alicia is our extra, our +1, 3 OGs and the lady. Again, thanks for showing up for this random rant that I've got going on right now. But a lot of folks who were not born either before or living during Jim Crow or shortly after Jim Crow have no real association to the issues that we see right about now. Now, the council members and I have done a few shows discussing some of the problems that we see with the folks who have come after the civil rights movements, who do not identify with it. As a result, they engage in behaviors that most of us born, let's say from 1970 back to at least, we'll say 1950 or 55. So that makes us kind of old, in our 50s and 60s. But a lot of us remember what type of disparagement that came with living through Jim Crow and living shortly thereafter Jim Crow. Now, I myself was born in 1970, and I say this a lot and I can't say it enough. And this goes for, again, Chicago Rilla and Top Cat, who aren't here tonight. The saying is that men were respected, women were virtuous, and children did not speak until spoken to. In today, 2025, that sounds harsh to people. But again, if you were born back in the time frame that we were, it's not that it was considered harsh, because it wasn't. It was standard operating procedure. And when I say standard operating procedure, I mean there was still a level of decorum or respect that was being taught to children, white, black, Hispanic, you name it, because there was still this concept that the United States or America was a land of opportunity, and based upon the laws and we'll just say the laws that were in place, if people were to abide by it, and we're talking about after 1965, after civil rights was passed, to include the voting rights was passed, people would have the opportunity to compete for the American dream and be a part of it. John, what's going on, man? Glad you could drop in. Yeah, so when I think about the American dream and I listen to what is being said now versus what was said back then, the opportunity was just granted. So we're talking in 1964, 1965, the Civil Rights Act had been passed, the Voting Rights Act had been passed. So now the opportunities that people had marched for, had sit-ins for, had marches for, to where high pressure water hoses were turned on them, dogs were turned loose, they were jailed, hence why you see the picture that I have here of folks who actually had mug shots back then, the civil rights mug shots. You see everything that was fought for back then that is now slowly dissipating because we don't have anyone prepared to fight. Now, I'm not saying that this is just a black issue. Ideally, we are seeing that black are being targeted with DEI. And we've seen the negative connotation that's been placed on it. Didn't earn it was the first thing that was being used. And that was the way to describe Kamala Harris or anybody else who was currently in office or leaving office. Now, I look at DEI, or I call it Trump's DEI, division, extortion, and intimidation. How else can you not see that when shifting subject here? We're looking at people who are now losing the ability to get education made available to them. What was one of the main things that used to be discussed about education? No matter what in the world that people try and take from you, if you got your education, that couldn't be taken. Well, apparently that seems to be all to the side now. Now we're watching this whole idea here, or at least the perspective of what DEI stood for, going to the wayside. Diversity, equity, inclusion. It is all going away. We're seeing every day more and more universities that are having their funding stripped. They're losing their grants because of this nonsensical approach saying that DEI is divisive and it is revisionist and it is bad for the country. Now, I look at all this that's being said by the entities that are putting this in place, and it reminds me of, if you think about it again, Christianity. Notice I said this is random, but I'm going to piece all this together. I'm just putting all the things that are in my mind out on the table. I can recall when people would talk about Christianity and speak of what good that the Lord was doing in the world and how the Lord was supposed to move. Now, if anybody knows me, they know that I am an atheist. I do not believe in religion of any kind. However, that doesn't mean that I would have myself stand in front of a church while a dead person is being brought out in caskets and sit here and yell slurs if the person happened to be gay or if the person happened to be black. This is something that a Baptist church was doing back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were showing up at the funerals of even soldiers and making statements that were contrary to the supposed idea of religion and what it stood for. So I'm looking at all the theocracies that are in place right now that is working against society in and of itself. Now, again, as I say, DEI, oops, oh yeah, as I said here, with DEI, we see that as being aimed mostly at blacks, although it was shown that DEI benefited white women as well as blacks and others. But still, the focus has been on black culture in and of itself. The Smithsonian, everything about them, Smithsonian is now being called divisive and racist. Yet, in a video that I previously released, you see Donald Trump in 2017 talking about how great that the Smithsonian was and how proud he was, or somewhere in there, stating that he was happy to speak on it. He was showing praise for the Smithsonian and the Black History exhibit. But fast forward to now, where he's got nothing but vitriol and spite to say. Now, this was a technique that was used when, going back to religion for a second, when Christianity was first making its appearance on the scene, to where you had to denigrate and disparage whoever was on top. Now, this is going to be a show that I have coming up here, but Alicia and I talk about this a lot. Serapis, Serapis. This individual, or let me take this back, this deity was a fictionalized version of one of the first white pharaohs in Egypt. Ptolemy the first Soter, or Ptolemy, depending upon what region of the world you're in. But Ptolemy the first Soter was a white pharaoh who wanted to be seen as a deity, little g for a god, because the majority of pharaohs were seen as gods in and of themselves. So just to speed this along here, he had an image that was created of him. They even had coins. And through the creation and a little bit of killing of the clergy who would not accept him as a deity, but eventually he got his wish to be, we'll say, deified, if that's a word or not, but he became a deity. The worship of Serapis made it all the way back to Europe. I kid you not, look it up. If you were to type in Serapis was worshipped before Jesus or before Christianity, you would see that before everyone prayed to the fictional biblical character Jesus Christ, they prayed to Serapis. And again, I'm going to do a video on this to outline this, because if we're going to be getting into the times of where we are right now, where we have misinformation, disinformation, and we're getting people pulled further and further from the truth, if everything is going to be in disarray, then I might as well go ahead and start bringing out information that has been obscured for such a time. Now, speaking of obscured, we talked about ancient Africans. Now, Chicago Rilla and myself started this conversation maybe about a week ago, and I believe Alicia was in on some of the information as well. Matter of fact, she's done some time stamping for me. One of the things that crossed my mind and is continuously going through my mind right now is how, what's the best way to put this, is how Africa, or should I say Africans, have had three major incursions to their history. One that's going on right now. But if we go back in time to the continent of Africa and we just look at the incursions that have played a part in the history, most folks have not given this any type of thought or any consideration. And that's based upon what we're taught and how we interpret everything around us right now. Indoctrination. I'm going to slide forward here a bit. So again, I said I'm going to be moving back and forth a little bit. Nothing is planned here. This is completely random. But when looking at the concept of indoctrination, you have to ask yourself, is what you're repeating, is what you've learned, is what you know to supposedly be true, something that was taught to you from a perspective of fact, or did you learn it from an idiot? And because no one was there to tell you different, you took this on intrinsically as a value that you hold. Ask yourself that question. What is it that you believe right now that is truly fact? Or is it something that you were taught because your parents were taught and their parents were taught and so forth? Now, going more so towards the aspect of indoctrination, just recently, it was shot down somewhere where they were trying to put the 10 Commandments in school. Again, this is recently just shot down. Now, what was crazy to me about this when I stopped and thought about it is that you hear people complaining about indoctrination. Oh, we've got drag queens trying to read books to the kids. They're trying to indoctrinate them into that lifestyle. But yet no one has an issue with the 10 Commandments trying to be pushed into school, but that's not seen as indoctrination. See, that's the one thing that I've always noticed about Christianity is that as long as Christianity has got top billing, everything is all right. But if there's anything to be a foil to it, then there comes the problem. Going further into that, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember, but I'm going to say no. I can remember a time where Christians were bombing abortion clinics. Yes, folks, during Jon H.E.N.R.Y's time frame, I can remember an assortment of Christian violence that was overlooked, or if it wasn't overlooked, there was actions taken towards it. But still, the fact that you would take it upon yourself to bomb a clinic of innocent people in there, well, let me take this back. They did not consider the mothers of these unborn children innocent. So I want to say they had one or two major bombings through the 80s that I can recall. I'd have to go back and pick out the specific dates. But I'm looking at, once again, how this theocracy is starting to come back around. Of course, we always hear this talk of America was a Christian nation. No, it never was. Separation of church and state is what has always been in place, or used to be in place. So let me go ahead and stop my ramble here for a second. I'll go ahead and say again, find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we got going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe if this is what you're looking for. Do you think the Portuguese enslavement of the infidels was revenge for 711 AD Moorish colonization of Iberia? I really couldn't give a say on that, Alicia, only because of the fact that I haven't studied that time period too much as of yet. So I really can't say yay or nay. But what I do know from a little bit here, the Portuguese enslavement, we know that the Portuguese were the first to deal or to conduct transatlantic slavery. But going back to 711 AD, I really couldn't give an answer to this question, not because I wouldn't want to, but because I'm not too versed on that. But since you're bringing that up, give me some more perspective on that. Kind of lead me down the pathway of what's on your mind, and I'll try and give you a better answer if possible. But to look at this and read the question, I would have to go back and get a better assessment of it by actually reading and studying it to give a better response. Excuse me. Or better yet, did you want to come up on the panel, Alicia, or are you just going to float from the clouds for right now? Obviously, your choice, but if you want to come up, let me know and I'll drop the link. All right, so what else is on my mind right now? Oh, Jillian Michaels. Now, anyone who's still live in the chat, to include Alicia here, who remembers the Biggest Loser reality TV show? Anyone? So I forget the name of the guy who was there with, I want to say his name might have been Bob, but you had this, we'll call him Bob character, and Jillian Michaels, who were on reality TV back in the early 2000s when reality TV started to take off. And they had this show called The Biggest Loser. And what they were doing was helping people who were overweight become the best versions of themselves. And whoever became the best version won money at the end. So, excuse me, that was her introduction to me and the majority of America back then. In the clouds, all right? So somebody remembers the show. So as of late, Jillian has gotten herself into some trouble to whereas she was laying down what appears to be support for slavery. Now, I don't know if anyone else caught this, but as I said, it's a random rant. What I may need to do is go back and after the show, find some links and drop them down in the description. But she more or less made this statement that, do you know that only 2% of white Americans actually own slaves, as if that were to make it better? So I dropped a video earlier this evening, or actually a short. If you look for it, I think I called it Jillian's Slavery Fail or something along those lines. It was just a few hours ago, so I can't think of the title directly, my bad. But nonetheless, what I did was go back and take a look at the statement of the 2% of whites owning slaves. And what that 2% turned out to be that she was using was all of America and not focusing solely on the South, which is where predominantly slavery was being conducted. She tried to use a statistic that pulled in the entirety of America at the time, when in actuality, it was only within a certain confined area, which was the southern states. To what you start seeing 49% of slavery in this state, 39% of slavery in this state, which pretty much showed that she was being disingenuous, but also the majority of this that was being shown is that it was grossly misdrawn or underrepresented the amount of slavery that was going on. But more so, think about this. Your really rich landowners had 50 slaves or more. They were considered to be wealthy. And then, of course, you had those who may have had 25, some who had 30, and even to the point where people were able to rent slaves. Now, those people who weren't rich enough to own slaves desired to own slaves. So obviously, slavery was a big product down there, and it is never going to be fully admitted of how reliant the South was on slavery. Thank you, Lisa. I called it Jillian's Slavery Fail. I mean, to sit there and watch her make these statements. Hold on for a second. Let's do this. Let me see if I can find that. Give me a second, folks. Be right back. Should be just a second. I'm just off screen looking here, but check out my grooves here. Fair use, fair use. Back in just a hot second. All right, and we're back. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and shut the music off for a second. Well. All right, we'll pause that. And let's get a share screen thing going. Actually, let's do a share tab instead. I don't want to have all my sound all over the place. Let me see. I don't know if I can make this any large. I guess I can. Whoops.
All right, Jillian Michaels, slavery.
All right, so let me know if you can hear this. Alicia, since you're the only one who may be still here with us, let me know if you can hear this, all right? Fair use, fair use.
The claim that less than 2% of whites own slaves. Let's go ahead and do this. After a quick Google search of what does 2% of U.S. slave-owning households in the U.S. in 1860 in the southern states translate to, this is what I've got. Basically, what we're seeing here is that the 2% line that she threw out here was a distortion. While some sources state that about 2% of all U.S. households owned slaves in the 1860s, this figure is highly misleading because it includes northern states where slavery was negligible. A more accurate picture emerges when looking only at the southern states. So when we look at the fact of the southern states were the primary offenders here, we have in 1860, approximately 25% to 30% of southern households owned slaves. The 2% figure is derived from the total national population, which dilutes the true extent of slave ownership by including free states.
All right, so if you can hear that, as I was saying, she was clearly lying, or if not lying, she was trying to play down the effect, play down the effect that slavery had in the South, especially how many people actually own slaves. Let's continue on. Fair use.
Feel free to have a look at the numbers here, folks. And if anything, by all means, go back and put this inside of your search engine and see what you get. Even within the South, the percentage of slave-owning households varied widely by region, with lower rates in upland and mountainous areas. The 2% figure is a distortion that minimizes the central role of slavery in the Southern economy and social structure. Hey, but there's more. Of course, now here's a tweet that she threw out here trying to defend her statements. So are you in the all white people are bad camp, or can we acknowledge that slavery and oppression have been carried out by every race against every race throughout history? Well, no one is denying that. But the thing here is that you're trying to defend your statements by saying, well, we weren't the only ones. Really? Did you think that would help? Yes, in America, there were white slaveholders who committed horrific crimes against black people. But the reason your statistics come only from the South is because most other states outlawed slavery outright, recognizing it as morally reprehensible. Exactly. So the whole reason of you making a statement in this video that I'm doing right now is to point out the stupidity of your statement. And we can't ignore the roughly 350,000 white men who died in the Civil War to help end it. Slavery was abhorrent, but holding every white person past or present collectively guilty isn't accurate, and it certainly isn't productive. You know what isn't productive? You speaking on the 2%, which is bolstering or upholding the folks who fought for keeping slavery, as opposed to looking at the 350,000 white men who died trying to abolish it. But again, the ignorance of your statement. So we'll just let it go right here. MAGA influencers come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and preferential of sexes. I'll leave it right there. Let me know if you like it, share it if you do, and subscribe if this is what you're looking for. Jon H.E.N.R.Y out.
So basically, if you could hear that, and I apologize for the speed I was reading because it was a short, and I was trying to make sure I got it in under 3 minutes, because as I said before, I'm going to try and release things that are not as long as my typical hour, hour and a half, or beyond, depending on conversation, but to see if we can put a little more content out here that's a little bit easier for folks to digest. And what I'll do is take that small bit of content, and such as the short, and point it back, as most people do, towards a long version of the show, to include now that Alicia has volunteered, thank you, Alicia, to help with the time stamping. so we can kind of, or I shouldn't say kind of, but we can make it easier for people to pick out the hot button topics that we'll be talking about in the shorts. Marcus, thanks again for jumping in, man, and making it known what we've got going on over here. Yes, we got 7 likes, so that's more than I had before. We would like to get more than 7, but again, we're still rather small potatoes right about now. Now, one thing that I also go about on, since we're talking about my rant here, is that I want people to know that on this particular platform, all right, I've said it before, it is not a black platform, it's not a white, it's not Hispanic, it's not Muslim, it's not Asian, it's not for men, it's not just for women, it is for knowledge, it is for fact, and it is for also and primarily historical accuracy. Now, if anyone has noticed here, I do a lot of fact checking. I do that because there are too many platforms that I visit where facts are not featured, where folks are looking for a laugh, they're looking for confirmation bias, you name it. That is not what I'm here to do. Now, I do have a bias for fact and truth. All right, sue me. I'm willing to hear out what's going to be said here and then having a conversation, as long as we both can agree that if we're talking about a blue car, then our conversation is about that blue car and not someone trying to say that that blue car is a four-wheeled means of transportation that could be construed a car, that could be construed an airplane. But no, they won't come out and say that it is what it is, a blue car. We're not going to do that. I'm not looking for a distortive conversation. Excuse me. The DeWolf family still benefits from their involvement in the slave trade. And there's probably a few more to add to that from what Alicia is pointing out. See, that's one of the things that I noticed that Jillian did not take the time to mention. She was trying to spend the time she had surfing under the radar, trying to point out that, oh, well, white people weren't the only ones who engaged in slavery. And I've seen this in other chat forums where you have other folks who will come up and say, well, you had slaves in Africa before the slave traders came there, so why are you making a big deal out of it? Well, the deal here is that just because there was slavery amongst the African nations, and then we had slavery through the transatlantic trade, excuse me, perpetrated by the Portuguese and also by the English. But the fact is that regardless of who did it, it was reprehensible. It was abhorrent. That is the point. And looking at what Jillian had done here, so are you in the all white people or bad camp, or can we acknowledge that slavery and oppression have been carried out by every race against every race throughout history? It's like, girl, what are you doing? What are you trying to deflect from? Well, we weren't the only ones. No, you weren't, but that still didn't mean that it was not bad, that it was not abhorrent, that it was not shame and a stain on the country. What are you trying to do here? In total, the Bristol DeWolfs are believed to have transported more than 11,000 slaves to the United States before the African slave trade was banned in 1808. Oh yeah, they've got a lot of bodies on the books. And I say on the books, but literally, we were property. Africans were property back then. Didn't matter if somebody was pregnant. Okay, well, we'll wait for the child to be born, then sell the child, but keep the parents. This was a system of disenfranchisement. And to hear people try and talk their way around it is infuriating, is a proper way to say it. Some bullshit is another way that I can say this as well. But to look at people speak in this manner. But what's worse than that is you have someone who is the same culture as you, the same race as you, who have had this shared experience of culture. Although, yes, no, I was not a slave. My grandparents were not slaves. And I believe my great grandparents may have been old enough to remember slavery. I remember When I was 4 years old, I had a great grandmother that lived behind my grandparents' house. My grandfather's mother, I want to say that she was well in her 90s or so, but she still would make biscuits if I walked out to the house. She would still give me something to drink. You know, I was the great grandbaby. Well, actually, myself and my brother and my cousins, we were the great grandbabies. But nonetheless, that was probably the one and only family member that I can recall of that if I stop and think about it right now, she knew what the world looked like in the early 1900s. I want to say that she was born in the late 1800s, around 1880s or the 1890s. Excuse me. So, what is it like? Biscuits and molasses. So, you have to ask yourself, what is it like to have had a family member who knew what the world looked like before? I guess to me, right back then, it was before color television, before Captain Kangaroo, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. What was the world like back then? Now, again, being that I was born in 1975, excuse me, 1970, I was born 5 years after Jim Crow ended. So I can still remember how people would walk around and use the word, forgive me, nigger, as if nothing. I can still recall this. The kids would say it like it was nothing. And that was in the southern area. If I were home visiting my grandparents, if we happened to come home for the summer vacation, or if my father, who was military, happened to be stationed someplace on a remote assignment, so we were home to live there for a short period. So when I stop back and look at that time period of the 70s going up through the 80s, I can remember where, and again, I've said this on plenty of shows before, and Alicia can guarantee this, or should I say validate this, where it had gone from the conversation that I remember from adults back in the mid 70s talking about how blacks had gone from nigger, excuse me, to colored, to Negro. Then you had Afro American and African American mixed between the two, and then there was also black. Now those last three, um, sort of became synonymous somehow. But I do remember in the mid 70s how the concept of Afro American is what blacks, excuse me, were looking to be called. Now, Negro was also a part of that as well. I want to say it was Negro before Afro American, and then Black and African American were kind of mixed together towards the mid to late 80s and going forward. Now, here's the thing that really irks me about that during that time period. Now, you go back to where blacks were fighting to be heard, to be represented, to us, for us to have the same rights and privileges as the whites around it. We wanted the same things. And when we fought and finally got those things, one of the things I recall having a conversation with my father about recently was that we didn't take the time to ensure that was passed on to the following generations because everyone was enjoying the benefits of what they fought for right then and there. And that's not a bad thing. But what I'm saying is that not enough time was taken to cultivate and ensure that the fight that we had to get those rights would still be in place and have a caretaker or caretakers of people ready to defend it should those rights become threatened again, which is the case right now. So we are seeing the rights that were fought for by the men on these shirts. We're seeing those rights come under attack. But what are we doing about it? Well, the question is what can we do about it? So you heard me make the statement of the derogatory word, again, forgive me, nigger. The problem here is that we've got blacks walking around calling each other this name as if it's a term of endearment. I'm just going to say ninja right now, but you know what I mean. Yo, what up, ninja? Yo, that's my ninja. Now think about this. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Huey Newton, John Lewis, but we'll take it back further. We'll even say Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass. What would be their response to see the work and the effort they put in to ensure that we were given the same rights, the same freedoms, the same civil liberties, the activities that they had to endure to get us these rights, just to watch us calling each other ninja? What up, ninja? As if, again, it's a term of endearment. I made this statement a few times, and I've done this on the street with people that I meet, some people that I know, and I've made this comment as well on my platform. How often do you see people of the Jewish faith walk around saying, "What's up, K-word"? Honestly, do you ever see that? No, you don't, and you won't. But we ourselves have suffered as a race injustices, but yet we walk around, yo, ninja, and think nothing of it. We disenfranchise ourselves. We disparage ourselves, but then want to be upset if somebody else uses the word. I'll say again, when is the last time you've seen someone of Jewish faith walk around and say, "What's up, K-word"? You will never see that. You will never hear that. And if it is going on, it's nowhere in, I guess, an eye shot, if you want to call it eye shot, or any place where anyone can see that taking place. But we disparage ourselves and complain about not being treated in a particular fashion, although we disenfranchise ourselves on a day-to-day basis and act as if it's some type of badge of honor. Now, that is truly what disturbs and pisses me the most when I see these type of actions. We have folks who literally complain about, oh, the white man this, the white man that, but yet look at how we talk to each other, how we treat each other, how we speak to each other, how we use certain words that we think, well, we'll just use the word until it doesn't have any power anymore. No, the more you use it, the more you make it okay for anyone else outside of us to use it. All right, it is not a term of endearment, the word ninja, which I'm using in place of nigger. It is not a term of endearment. And anyone born 1970 and before thinks the same way that I do, because we remember, we were there. So that means that we are the last, or should I say, we are the memory of what America was before civil rights. And because the majority of those who have come after that have not seen that type of America, there's no affiliation with what I'm talking to. Even right now, what I'm saying is not registering or does not register with folks who have not seen what I call, top shelf racism. Yep, most people want to fit in. If you could, Alicia, go ahead and clarify or quantify that statement for me and others, just in case they're missing what you're saying here. Add clarity to it, to the moment. And if I can say respectively, Top Cat, who is not here right now, he's the oldest of our Council of OGs. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, there is the hat that the members wear. OG is, I want to say, 69 years of age, going on 70. So he has a clear definition, dare I say even better than me, of what racism is, because he had a family member that was lynched when he was growing up. So as he said to hear the young Black men and women use the word ninja so effortlessly, carelessly, dare I say, it pisses him to no length. And again, who could blame him? Again, he and I come from a time period. And I want to say even Chicago Real, if he was here, he just turned 51. Again, belated happy birthday to you, brother. He, along with Top Cat and I, can remember where the Ku Klux Klan was still burning crosses in people's yards, burning houses with blacks still inside of them, Black families, setting the house on fire, lynching. All this started dying out after the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Of course, then you had affirmative action. You had Operation Push. You had the creation of the Department of Justice, creating the Civil Rights Division. You also had the Rainbow Coalition. Now, here's the thing, folks. Hold on to that for a second. Let me go back to this. Let me do this. This is the comment that Alicia made. Most of us desperately want to fit in. And I asked her to quantify, and she's saying it's cool to be ignorant. Yes, Chris Rock even said something about that. He had a special about almost 20 years ago that talked about what's up. No, I'm keeping it real dumb. I'm gonna have to find that segment. If not now, I'll maybe include it in the link a little bit later. But yeah, the whole aspect of ignorance seemed to be the end thing, because if you were trying to better yourself, improve your thought process so you could have more out of life, if you came from I don't want to say society, environment. If you came from an environment that was primarily drenched in poverty, then you were considered trying to be white. My brother and myself, I can recall, we were called Oreos. Yeah, that was that. I don't even know if that insult is even used today, but the Oreo was how you talked about the Oreo cookies. You know, dark on the outside, but white on the inside. Yeah, yep, yeah. Alicia knows what I'm talking about as well. If you talked a certain way, if you could read a certain way, if you were able to answer questions, I can recall being in class when I was in the 7th or 8th grade. My family had just come back from spending 4 years in Minot, North Dakota. I'm talking way up north. We were probably, I want to say, maybe 30 miles from the Canadian border. But during my childhood, I should have said my brothers and I, our childhood, we spent the majority of our life on a military installation. And by being on a military installation, that means we were around Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, American Indian, even Indian from overseas, as far as the country of India, Muslims. We were around what I would call a Benetton commercial. I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember Benetton, but Benetton was international. It embraced everyone. So as a result, we had grown up in a multicultural environment. Now, as kids, did someone tell Black jokes? We tell Polish jokes. We tell Hispanic jokes. We may have done that, but it may have been one off. Even though it's still offensive, but when kids tell the jokes that don't really understand them, it's never offensive. It's like, haha, whatever, until you start getting older and understand the context and the effects of those supposedly innocent jokes you're telling as children. But nonetheless, I can recall never really having too many incursions with racism that I could think of until I started getting into my preteen years. We're talking maybe 11 or 12, where now kids are hearing words that they're seeing on television, where they can now watch some of the adult shows. I can remember back in the day, we had Showtime. There was a black box, or not a black box, but there's a box that was on television that allowed us to watch channels. This is when cable TV was starting to take effect. We're talking about the early days before there was WTBS. It was just TBS, Turner Broadcasting System. Now, this was at the point in time where the TV stations used to go off at night. And then if you woke up early enough in the morning, you could see the national anthem being played, and there would be a flag, the American flag show, and then the programming would start for the day. I can still remember where television used to go off at night and come on in the morning. So now, towards the end of 1979, going into the 80s, kids are starting to learn different words. I'll never forget the first time I can recall someone calling me nigger. I was at the swimming pool in Minot Air Force Base at Minot, North Dakota. I was swimming. It was summertime, of course, if you're going to be at the swimming pool. And I bumped into this little white kid. I think at the time I may have been 5'3", 5'4". He couldn't have been any taller than maybe 4'11", almost 5 feet. And it was an accident that we bumped into each other. I said, "Excuse me." And he said, "Your mom is a black nigger." I just said, "F you." And he ran off as soon as he said it. I didn't think anything of it because that was not a common occurrence yet. And then that following school year, there was a kid, I remember his name was Danny Dooley. Now, I've mentioned this in other live streams, but I'll go ahead and just, for the sake of tying the story together, because this is a rant. I remember in class one day, Danny just started calling me nigger for no reason. Nigger, for no reason. Now, I'm looking at him like he's an idiot because remember, I am only, let's say, 11 years old. Although I'm seeing and reading about the Ku Klux Klan in newspapers, I'm seeing it on television where the Klan has been burning blacks out of their homes, but I'm not really affected by that because, again, I am living on a military installation. You get out of line, security police comes, you have to go see your commander, and if you're messing up bad enough, you're given the option to move off the base with your child or put your child off base, or worst case scenario, you will be dismissed from the military. So there's a level of decorum, a standard that I have always grown up by. But yet when you moved around civilians who did not live that military lifestyle, who didn't have that form of regimented lifestyle, it's a totally different experience. And before I not acknowledge this, even though most of you can see this in the bottom right hand or left hand corner of your screen, wow. Oh yeah. I had, when I was in Germany, I was in Ramstein Ramstein, Germany, Ramstein Air Base, Germany, from 1997 until 2001. I want to say it was July 97 I got there, and I left December of 2001. I had a supervisor. Shout out to you, Big T, Tony Lucas. He would tell me about racism where he was from because he was from Georgia. He was a country boy. Now you think I'm dark. Let me stop because I'm going to send this to Big Bro. But nonetheless, Tony had told me about the time that they were standing at the bus stop. And I want to say there was a girl who was at the bus stop with him. She had grown up inside the military and she had started school in a public school system. So she's standing next to the road, and Tony and his boys, in their country accent, "Yo, go, you better gonna get back from that road like that, because these white boys come by and may throw some stuff on you." She's like, "Oh, that's silly. Why would anyone do that?" Now, this is the mentality that I had back in those days. And sure enough, she's standing by the bus stop. A whole bunch of white guys came by in a truck and also in the back. Said, "Hey, what's going on?" And then she says hi, being nice. Then, of course, they start calling nigger and everything. And then someone picks up a bucket of fluid and drops it on her. And then they take off laughing. They had thrown a bucket of piss on her that they'd been pissing in for who knows how long. Tony and them warned her, said, hey, you may want to get away from that road. Of course, now she's furious, she's screaming, and she's covered in piss. And the one thing Tony said that they told her, girl, you better go home and hurry up and get a tetanus shot or something, because you don't know how long they've been pissing in that bucket and just letting it sit. So this is the type of stuff that you would get in these southern towns or in the South, depending upon where you were. Now, I'm from Tennessee. And if you're looking in the news, you can see what's going on with Tennessee as of late. Matter of fact, that was another part of the rant that I want to speak of tonight. I put that down here somewhere. I think it was DEI, the University of Memphis. I wanted to go play basketball at the University of Memphis back in the late 80s, about 88 or 89 when I started college. But I wasn't good enough and I wasn't tall enough. No wonder I didn't play. Now, funny enough, this is about the same time that Anthony Hardaway was starting school down at the University of Memphis. I think he had to sit out the first year because of Proposition 48 or 42. I can't really recall, but I remember that his grades weren't that good. Oh yeah, that is a scar for life moment. And I really hope that she didn't have any type of disease that came with it. Excuse me. But as I was saying, looking back, 1989, I wanted to go to Memphis State, but did not have the grades for it. So I went to a junior college instead. Different story. Why am I bringing up Memphis State? Because of DEI. As of today, they are shutting down divisions, civil rights divisions, I believe, due to DEI and the pressure that's being put on most institutions of higher learning from the Trump administration. Matter of fact, let me do this. Let me see if I can actually bring that up here. Bear with me. University of Memphis and DEI. Say civil rights. Found it. All right, so bear with me, folks, while I move a few things around. There we go. I think I've got it. Share screen. And no audio, so we'll just do entire screen this time. Actually, let's go back to tab. There we go. So let me know if you can see this. University of Memphis announces end of DEI programs, shutters multicultural affairs office. This week, the University of Memphis announced sweeping changes to comply with a state law banning diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI. Damn, now Tennessee is really getting under the Trump administration for this nonsense, and they are in lockstep. The state law named the Dismantling DEI Department Act refers to such programs as discriminatory preference and requires all public institutions, including governments and colleges, to dismantle them. One of the first and biggest parts of the University of Memphis's anti-DEI measures was shutting down the Office of Multicultural Affairs. The closure came less than 24 hours after a college-wide email sent out by University President Bill Hardgrave Thursday afternoon. I feel disappointed and sad. I spent all of my 4 years here, Cortland Robinson, a U of M senior, said of the closure. This was my place to go after class. So if anybody wants to reading more about this, again, U of M announces end of DEI programs, shutters multicultural affairs office. Now, again, folks, this is what I'm saying about we don't have people prepared and ready to fight after I'm gone. Now, I'm just really getting myself in tune and ready to raise some hell about this and put my foot down in some areas. But I can't be the only one. We are literally watching a level of extremism that has managed to get their foot in the door, and they're changing rules. We know that are biased because the rules were written to not allow what is going on right now. But if people do not participate in the process, which is our civic duty, if we do not participate in that, then this is the outcome that we have to deal with. This is what happens when we are not ready to fight for the rights that we have if, and I say this, if we do not understand what was done or what was required to achieve them. Hence why I say, yo, what up, Ninja? Again, think of Martin Luther King. Think of Frederick Douglass. All right, think of Huey Newton. Think of Malcolm X. Think of what they would think of, just the absolute shock, awe, and even how furious they would be seeing blacks call each other that word, the N-word, after they themselves fought to have that word thrown out, disparaged, stomped on, never to be used. But we use it because, oh, that's my ninja. What type of reaction do you think you would have if these men were alive today to see what's happened with our culture? Worse yet, shifting gears, our own culture lying to us. Our own culture who will sit here and bring this nonsense into our community. Now, I'll make no bones about this. If anyone has seen me on the YouTube platform, if you've seen me on different shows, or if you've just seen me here within my own platform, you know that I have no love lost for Black conservatives. I'm speaking about the Black conservatives who do us harm, aka Black Trojan horses. The Byron Donalds, the Tim Scotts, Candace Owens. You know, these individuals who sit here and schlep for the overseer. And we see from them what I call the Black conservative comfort on the plantation behavior. They're the ones who will bring this nonsense into our communities. Oh, the Ku Klux Klan was founded by the Democratic Party. No, they were not. Oh, the Southern Strategy didn't exist. Yes, it did. And then we see even the bigger lies that are told. Planned Parenthood is in 79% of Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. No, it is not. Or here's the one that really keeps Blacks going. The federal government kicked Black men out of the apartment, out of the homes. No, the federal government did not do any of this. But these are the rallying lies that Blacks in our lower socioeconomic status areas will listen to and follow and believe just because a Black person is able to put words together and it sounds intelligent, so it must be true. Folks, we have got to stop this. More so when I look at that, that is a level of indoctrination, but we're seeing that indoctrination coming through social media. But what is the first level or first introduction to indoctrination everyone experiences? Religion. That is where it all starts. As I said before, I'm a known atheist. I don't go around disparaging those who are believers, but I don't sit here and let them try and have a conversation with me either about, Jesus is love, because Jesus never existed. As I was saying before, switching back to the very beginning of this rant of mine, again, this is a random rant. I made the statement that before Jesus was worshipped, Serapis, a white pharaoh who had a god that was created in his image, so he can be a deity, Serapis, Ptolemy the first Soter, was who Serapis was modeled off of. He was worshipped. He, against the Serapis image, was worshipped in Rome, throughout Europe, as far as England, and even, I want to say, Ireland or Scotland. If you were to go to the National Museum in England right now, there is a bust of Serapis that is there right now. And when you have this conversation with a lot of Christians, they will get upset and say, "Oh, you lie, blasphemy, and all this other nonsense." Serapis was worshipped before Jesus was even spoken, before Christianity came to be. And what a lot of these Christians hate to be told, and even Google will back this up, because Google is a system of computers, of networks. You can only find information that has been added to it. If information has not been added to that network, then it's not going to be there. Or because AI is being used more now, AI will start answering questions, but you'll not get the same answer. You'll get a different answer for the same question. You're going to have more nuance added to it. So you have to really know how to phrase your question to get the right answer. But yes, if you were to type in, was Serapis worshipped before Christianity, or was Serapis worshipped before Jesus? Or even better yet, was Serapis worshipped throughout Europe? The answer for all three of those would be yes. So I'm going to have a show on that as well that's going to kind of pull all this together. Oh, there's so much more rant to be done, folks, here. But the way that I see it right now, since things are so out of control at this moment in time, why not go ahead and just add to this, but bring clarity and all the confusion and the nonsense? Let's go ahead and make it known where the truth actually lies, because there's going to be a lot of information coming forward that I'm going to mention that people are going to refuse and say that's a lie, not because it's a lie, but because they've never been taught this. They've never been shown this, because they've been taking things at face value. Switching gears again. Around 8,000 BCE, along the Nile of Africa, there were hunter-gatherer societies. Now, anyone who's been following along over the last month or so knows that I did a complete show on this. It started out with Chicago Rilla and myself, but Chicago's Wi-Fi dropped out, so he had to bounce. And I believe Alicia stepped in for a little bit. Now, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm sure that she's probably waking up here and there and chiming in, or she's gone to bed right now. But nonetheless, you had hunter-gatherer societies that were living along the Nile of Egypt back when it was more lush, back in 8,000 BCE. You had culinary, you had science, you had mathematics, you had medicine. We're talking at least 25 to 30,000 BCE that existed, that ancient Africans were already knowledgeable of. Dare I say, even experts in. But here's something that blows people's minds. Now, everyone is familiar with Stonehenge in England, right? Oh, I'm over here making jokes. She's still here. All right, sleep in then. So we know there's Stonehenge in England. I want to say that maybe around 2000, 3000 BCE is how they date Stonehenge. But you have two formations. I won't call them just rock formations, but you have two formations in Africa that were dated before Stonehenge. You know what? Since we're in here having this little rant of mine, let me go ahead and share this as well. So this is either going to be topics that are going to be in an upcoming show or a show that I've already done. Adam's calendar. Where is this? So the first one I'm going to bring up here is Adam's calendar. Now, Adam's calendar is looked at as being 75,000 years old. So I'm just going to have this in a question format just so you can see the information that it puts out here. And there is a second one as well. And I think they call this Stonehenge, or a small version of Stonehenge as well. I want to say is the Noptoplaya. Noptoplaya. Okay, my mistake. And how old was that? I think that was 7,500 years old. All right, yep. Got it. All right, pardon me for waffling here, folks, but I had to make sure that I had my information right. So once again, let me go ahead and share the screen. I'll just share the window. All right, so the first thing I was talking about here, Adam's calendar. Now, Adam's calendar is over 75,000 years old. You know what? I've got the wrong screen. Hold up for a second. Share. Try this again. There we go. All right, Adam's calendar. The age of Adam's calendar is highly debated, with proponents suggesting it's around 75,000 years old or even older, based on astronomical alignments and rock erosion rates. However, this is not supported by academic consensus, with some researchers attributing it to a much later period, probably the 16th century, and questioning the evidence presented by its main promoter. So this is what you'll see here when you have information that goes against the grain of what people have been taught, literally. So if I were to put this back in and we look at it again, it would go back to stating what's already known to be true, which is, yes, it is over 75,000 years old. But this is the main reason why I make sure, as I was telling folks, that you need to save any information that you find out on the internet, because in this age and time right now, within this particular administration, there's information that is being dropped that has always been accessible and known to be true. So here, I'll show you this. Now I'm just going to let you see again what's being said here. However, this is not supported by academic consensus. All right, so that is a lie. It has been supported by archaeological consensus. But as I said before, AI is now a part of your searches. As well as being a part of your searches, what you're also going to see, as I've said before, here is that depending on how many times you ask this same question, you'll get a different answer. So let's do this. Instead, let's say, is Adam's calendar dated to be over? Now, again, notice saying there's no academic consensus or scientific evidence to support this claim. Now, I'm doing this because, as I said before, I want you to see how AI is conducting itself. More so, the more you ask questions, the more now that you're going to get answers that are going to refute that. Now, keep in mind now, AI, whether you call it or not, still has a master. And those masters who control information searches have the ability to filter. So let me do this one more time. I'll ask it in yet again a different structure and watch how the answer comes back again. But you're going to see the same thing that's going to say all of a sudden, there's no consensus or scientific evidence. How old is Adam's calendar supposed to be? We'll say per scientific standards. I'm just throwing something in here, but I want to show you how we're getting three different answers for the same question being asked, which is the age of Adam's calendar. Now, having said that, I want you to look at the information that I saved from the show that I did regarding Adam's calendar. Stand by. This is a perfect introduction to what I was talking about regarding web searches and how now they are not as solid and candid as they used to be. Literally, you see that I asked the same question in a different format 3 different times. It held steady, saying that, oh, well, there's no scientific statement of this. There's no way to tell. But true to form, I had a different answer when I was doing my show the other night about Adam's calendar. Just a moment. Let me see if I can find it. Cephas, Masters. Back. Here we go. Adam's calendar is a mysterious ancient stone structure located in Mpumalanga, province of South Africa. It's a circular arrangement of stones believed by some to be a calendar or astronomical observatory, possibly the oldest of its kind. While its exact age and purpose are debated, some theories suggest it's over 75,000 years old. Now, again, you can see that depending on how you type the information in about it, it's going to give you a different perspective. But you always see 1 or 2 things that'll be constant. Claims by Michael Tellinger that it was an alien-made structure and a 300,000-year-old calendar have been disputed. An alien-made structure. However, other theories propose its use for astronomical observation and religious ceremonies. So again, depending upon how you type information in, you're going to get a different answer. But roughly debated where you're seeing that people or even input saying that, oh, it's not that old. Yes. If you do more searches, depending on how you answer the question or ask the question, it still comes out to be 75,000 years old. So move that to the side. And then you have a second structure. It's called the Nabta-Playa. So I asked the question, or I stated Nabta-Playa is 77,500 years old. Yes, Nabta-Playa is approximately 7,500 years old, dating back to around 7,500 BCE. This is, let me stress that out a bit. This is an ancient archaeological site in the Egyptian desert, features megalithic stone circles and other structures that likely serve as an early astronomical observatory and ceremonial center for nomadic people. The site is older than Stonehenge by about 2,000 years and provides evidence of early human culture, animal agriculture, and astronomical observation in the region. Now, again, I ask you, How many of you have ever heard of this structure? Hell, I didn't know about it until maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, simply because you don't hear this mentioned in what we have in our books known as history right now. There's various elements of history that's been more or less suppressed, but if you make mention of it to whereas people never heard of it, the first thing that they do is call you a liar. The Leotali footprints are a 3.6 million year old trail of fossilized footprints in Leotoli, Tanzania. All right, I did not know that. New information to me. Has anyone else ever heard of this? Oh, I typed who are the creators of Adam's calendar. Yes, Adam's. Go ahead, folks. Make sure you type in Adam's calendar, and you're going to get a wide-ranging information from folks who are disparaged and say, "Oh, well, it's not really that old. Oh, it can't be." But here's the thing that people seem to forget here: ancient Africans were practicing culinary and science 50,000 BCE, and even earlier than that. But you have to know how to look for that, because if you don't, then you're going to be stuck with the answers that are nuanced or lacking context when you do the search nowadays. Again, being that AI is doing the search for you. I wouldn't say doing the search for you, but searching and not really giving a lot of consideration, again, to context. Just understand that there is more information that I'm going to present that many of you may have never heard or even presented to you in a particular way that will be surprising to you. Tell you what, let's stop this. Now, the last thing I want to do here in this rant. Now, I'm going to save that. I may do a show. I'm going to save that. What's another here? Let's go back to being a little bit more modern here, right? Now, who has been keeping up in the news where Alina Habba, who was appointed by Donald Trump here, where was this? New Jersey? Yeah, let me get this set up here. Where was this? New Jersey? No, it wasn't New Jersey. He was attorney. Here's one thing about when you start getting into that range where you have a 5 designator, being I'm 55 now, some things skirt your mind here. But the thing that I'm keeping in mind here is how you slip the punch, this thing, or do an end run around the process. And this is a perfect example here of Donald Trump, once again, doing an end run around the process. Okay, I was right. I kept saying New Jersey, but I wasn't sure. So what we're looking at right now, oh, I'm sorry, no one else sees it just yet. Forgive me. All right, so what we're looking at right now is, if you've been keeping up here, Alina Habba was appointed as the attorney for New Jersey. Now, as of recent days, her appointment has been considered unlawful. Now, why is that? So Donald Trump likes to use acting. If you recall, in his first administration, he always had acting this, acting that. Now, there's a reason why he did that. Let me move this over. Now, you should be able to see this. During his first term, Donald Trump made frequent use of acting officials to delay or bypass the official Senate confirmation process for key appointments. He publicly stated that he preferred acting officials because it gave him more flexibility. This practice drew criticism for undermining government stability transparency, and accountability. All right, so is anyone surprised? This suspects a man and a woman carrying something because of the weight distribution, possibly a baby. Okay, you're talking about the fossilized trails again, right? All right. My mistake for not catching that a moment ago. So, as I was saying here, Donald Trump likes to use the word acting because it allows him to, again, slip the punch or kind of circumvent the process. Now, if anyone remembers what's been going on here, Alina Habba, well, let me just put it right here. The administration's maneuvering. Failed Senate confirmation. In March 2025, Habba was appointed interim U.S. attorney, but her nomination for the permanent position submitted in July was effectively stalled due to the opposition from New Jersey's Democratic Senators Cory Booker and Andy Kim. Judges appoint a replacement. After her 120-day interim term ended in July, a panel of federal judges in New Jersey followed legal procedure by appointing a career prosecutor, Desiree Lee Grace, to replace her. The administration response. The administration responded by firing the judges appointed. Attorney General Pam Bondi fired Grace. Then they withdrew Alina Habba's nomination. Now check this out. Withdrawing Habba's nomination. The White House withdrew Habba's nomination for the permanent role. This was a key legal maneuver, as federal law generally prevents a nominee from serving in an acting capacity. Do you see what's happening here? Reappointing Habba. With her nomination withdrawn, the administration then reappointed Habba as acting U.S. attorney, arguing this allowed her to serve for an additional 210 days under federal statute. So what you see right now here is the same game that Donald Trump has always played, trying to find the loophole to exploit. And he almost did it. Well, I shouldn't say almost. He did do it. But the judiciary is finally coming into the chat, and they are fighting back, finally checking this guy on his nonsense. So the court's ruling on August 21st, hell, that was just what, 2 days ago? On August 21st, 2025, U.S. District Judge Matthew Brand, a Republican appointee, ruled against the administrator's actions. Brand concluded that Habba had been unlawfully held the role since July 24, 2025, when her term expired. He found that the administration's attempt to use the acting appointment to bypass the Senate confirmation process violated the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and other governing procedures. Brand wrote that allowing such an approach would enable a president to repeatedly bypass Senate confirmation to keep a preferred candidate in office indefinitely, which is pretty much what he did, dare I say, for most of his first term. The judge disqualified Habba from participating in any ongoing cases and stated that actions that she took since July may be declared void. Boom. So this is what happens when your government gets involved. And they've seen this shystiness that Donald Trump has played on more than one occasion. Now, at the same time, there has been rulings against DEI. Judge rules against Trump on DEI. Now, this might be a few days ago, where it says that a judge strikes down Trump administration's actions at eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's gen it up. So this is gone. This is gone. Judge strikes down Trump administration guidance against DEI programs in schools. A federal judge on Thursday struck down 2 Trump administration actions aimed at eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the nation's schools and universities. In her ruling, U.S. District Judge Stephanie Gallagher in Maryland found that the Education Department violated the law when it threatened to cut federal funding from educational institutions that continued with DEI initiatives. The guidance has been on hold since April, when 3 federal judges blocked various portions of the Education Department's anti-DEI measures. The ruling Thursday, again, this is on the 15th of August, the ruling Thursday followed a motion for summary judgment from the American Federation of Teachers and the American Sociological Association, which challenged the government's actions in a February lawsuit. All right, so again, good things are happening now that we see folks finally checking Donald Trump and his craven lawlessness for the most part. No other way to put this. But it's good to see that we finally got the judiciary standing in here. Now, also keep in mind, the judiciary who are standing against Donald Trump are now being called, well, since April, activist judges. Again, I say activist judges. So riddle me this, folks. Where was the title of activist judge when Judge Eileen Cannon, through assistance from Clarence Thomas, just up and decided to rule that the prosecutor or the special counsel investigating Donald Trump was illegally appointed? No one called Eileen Cannon an activist judge. And you know why? Because it helped Donald Trump. I mean, let's be honest, folks. He had 34 counts against him. He's stolen classified. It was strewn all over the place where you could see it. He was dead to rights. But of course, they had to create immunity in order to get him out of that jail. And then the last thing was making this statement that, special counsel was illegally appointed. But here's the problem with that. And I showed this in the show a couple of nights ago. The special counsel appointed to investigate Joe Biden, Robert H.E.N.R.Y. It was Robert H.E.N.R.Y. He was allowed to conduct, finish, and even post the findings from his investigation. Whereas Jack Smith was hindered, beleaguered, and finally forced to stop his investigation. So what do these two men have in common? Both of these men, special counsels to two different presidents, were appointed by the same damn attorney general, which was Merrick Garland. So tell me, how is it that two men appointed by the same attorney general can see one of them, and only one of them, considered to be illegally appointed, which was Jack Smith? But the other guy, Robert H.E.N.R.Y., who was also appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland, is not considered to be illegally appointed, and he was allowed to finish his investigation of Joe Biden. Don't think that I didn't call Washington. I tried to email Cory Booker. I tried everybody. Nobody returned any phone calls or emails. Think that one over, folks. Think that one over. Moving yet again. I think we're done here with that one. This is an interesting rant I'm in, huh? I didn't expect to be going this far, but please, by all means, if you like what I'm doing, hey, let me know. Share it if you do. Subscribe if this is what you're looking for. And if it's something that you can find anyone else who might be interested in what they might be looking for. Share the words, folks. Now, also as of recently, you've seen here that Hispanic grants have now been turned upside down. Oh, yes. They are working overtime here. Hispanic grants discontinued. Now, I've got to do some grilling tomorrow, folks. I'm supposed to be doing some smoked prime rib, and I'm still up here doing this. But when the information gets going, you got to get it out of your system, right? So we'll add to stage here. Who here is familiar with what just happened today, where the Trump administration just said, hey, no more grants for Hispanic students? Yep. Justice Department won't defend grants for Hispanic students. Well, that's what it's going to read into here, but let me just go ahead and put this on to you folks. Federal grants for Hispanic serving institutions are currently facing legal challenges, with the U.S. Department of Justice declining to defend the program in court. In addition, the Trump administration has suspended or terminated several other initiatives and grants intended to support Hispanic and other minority communities. Now, who here is going to say that Donald Trump is not a bigot or a racist? Seriously, who is really going to still fix their mouths to say that he is not? Everything he is targeting has to do with people of color. Of course, Tennessee in the middle of this mess once again. Legal challenge. In June 2025, the state of Tennessee and an anti-affirmative action group sued the U.S. Education Department to halt funding for HSIs. The lawsuit argues that the grants are unconstitutional because they create an arbitrary ethnic threshold, causing schools that don't meet the requirements to lose out on millions in federal funding. You know, instead of me reading all this, I'll let you guys get to it here. This is what you want to put inside of your search engine, and hopefully you'll find more information that goes with that. But this is just recent that this ruling has just come out in the last 24 hours or so. But now notice again, as I said before, you have a lot of attacks of DEI that's been associated with minorities. But for whatever reason, you've got an all-white town being built in Georgia that nobody is talking about. It gets shushed under the rug as soon as you mention it. It is not even trending that much anymore. I think they call it RTTL, Return to the Land. I mean, they even have their own page. We'll just go to the page itself. Now, again, I am not one who deals with supremacists, whether they're black, white, I don't at all. Not how I roll, but private membership associations. So again, Return to the Land is an all-white movement where it's an all-white town, and you have to be white to get into it. Return to the Land is a private membership association for individuals and families with traditional views and common continental ancestry. We hold events and conferences, and we help groups of our members from European heritage communities, meaning all white. We seek to create a decentralized movement formed of various individual societies returning to the land. Now, if you're going to return to the land, why not go back to Europe? All right, why not go back to England? Why not go back to your ancestral lands? But no, they consider their ancestral lands to be America, the ancestral lands of the Native American. We will promote strong families with common ancestry and raise the next generation in an environment that reflects our traditional values. We will facilitate economic and social harmony between all groups and individuals in our movement. Above all, we will continue to engage in a never-ending pursuit of excellence, refusing to lower our standards or lose sight of our goals. Now, notice how everything is written here. They do not give any specifics about their values or their goals, but they will emphasize European heritage communities. European heritage communities. Is anybody reading between the line of this code here? Let's do this. RTTL. Let me see if I have a news article from a reputable source. Let's try Reuters. The Independent. Yes, the Independent is good. Oh, here we go. Now, I don't know who's left in the clouds. I'm not sure. Whoops. Right, go back, right? Right. What is the popular thing they used to tell blacks all the time? Go back to your country. What do you mean go back to my country? If I've got to go back, your ass is going to be in the seat next to me because you're not from here either. I can recall, again, in the 80s, hearing, go back to your country, as if you're over here and this is your home of origin also. Come on, folks, let's not be stupid. But me being logical, making a statement to a racist, it doesn't make any sense. All right, so here's something else that goes back to this return to the land. Whites-only community plotting expansion to another state as its efforts to build a white nation continue. Return to the land, an ethno-nationalist living community in remote Arkansas that welcomes only people with traditional views and European ancestry, reportedly planning new project in Missouri. Look, someone took that out. Let me refresh that. I saw something that would be offensive. Hold up, let's get that to come back. I saw something there. No, why? Doesn't matter. A far right ethno-nationalist group that has set up a whites-only community in a remote part of the Ozarks in northeastern Arkansas is reportedly exploring the possibility of expanding north into Missouri. Now look at this. We're talking about division. We're talking about equity. We're talking about inclusion being thrown out, but yet nothing is being done for an all-white city that is still getting built right now. Donald Trump has made no news of this. No one in his administration has made any sounds about this, but you're not seeing too much information about this in the news cycle anymore. Make sure you guys peddle this around, whoever sees this. Return to the Land, RTTL, which describes itself as a private membership association. Now recall here, we just saw that. Private membership. They have no information out here because they don't want to get called out or have too many people have an idea of what they stand for. But thank goodness for social media when used properly, right? Return to the Land, which describes itself as a private membership association for individuals with traditional views and European ancestry, opened its first community in Arkansas in October 2023 and is now considering entering a second state, likely near Springfield, according to NBC's regional affiliate KSNT. The group is opposed to mass immigration, multiculturalism, and forced integration, and reportedly does not welcome non-white, non-Christian, or LGBT plus people, explaining that its members are seeking to separate ourselves from a failing modern society and return to pastoral living in lands that they did not come from. You want a white nation? Build a white town? RTTL's co-founder Eric Orwell asked in the next video promoting the initiative. It can be done. We're doing it. RTTL's flagship community spans approximately 150 acres of land, is home to 40 inhabitants, and features its own cabins, roads, wells, and community center, and a schoolhouse. Yeah, all this is going on while Donald Trump is using the Department of Justice to distort civil rights claims, to undermine DEI. I mean, literally to where it's now become a strike force, to whereas white males are being discriminated against. We're also seeing the fact that if anyone is of color who has a position that is in defiance of Donald Trump, we're seeing, I think it's Linda Cook now, as part of the Federal Reserve. He is trying to run her out as of right now. Letitia James, she successfully prosecuted Trump and won the case. However, the judge just threw out the $500 million fine that was posed against Trump, even though he was found to have committed fraud. Now, explain this to me, folks. Maybe I'm missing something. But if you commit fraud, that means you're cheating people, right? So how is it that you throw out I guess the final result, which was Donald Trump defrauded folks $500. Well, actually, it was 350. I guess interest came with that, but 350 million with interest, 500 million. But even though if you were to chop off the interest, even go back to 350 million, remember he was found guilty of fraud. How are you going to let him keep the money that he supposedly defrauded people out of? Makes no sense. But at least they did let the final conviction stand. So he's still guilty of fraud. But you know what else that makes him? Here, we'll go ahead. We'll end things on this note right here. Wait, and let me turn the lights out here for a second. Drum roll. So I say again, Donald Trump has been found guilty on some other fraud charges before. Let's think about Trump University, or actually, let me take that back. I think Trump University, but then there's also that charity that had to shut down because of fraud. So he's been found guilty of fraud before. But of course, in this case where he was found guilty, again, they let him keep all the money that he defrauded folks out of, but the ruling still stood. So the question I asked, can Donald Trump be considered a convicted felon? Yes, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. In January 2025, he was sentenced following his conviction on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in New York. Key details of his conviction. Conviction on May 30th, 2024. A New York jury found Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts related to falsifying business records to conceal a hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. At his sentencing on January 10th, 2025, Trump received an unconditional discharge, meaning he did not face prison time, fines, or probation. The judge stated this was the only lawful sentence that would not infringe upon the office of the president, as Trump was 10 days away from his inauguration. Legal status. An unconditional discharge affirms his status as a convicted felon, and the conviction remains on his record. Ongoing appeals. Trump has vowed to appeal the conviction. However, the case was considered final and appealable after the sentence was delivered. Now, the problem here is that now that he's gotten into his seat, we see here that he's able now to pass laws and change rules to where it's almost retroactively, he is now repealing certain actions. The first thing he did was the money that was allotted for U.S. aid and other charities, they pulled that money back. As I said the other night, when they pulled that money back, they stockpiled it to whereas now they have money to give people to join ICE and get a signing bonus for $50,000, to include also student loan forgiveness. Let's think about all the people here who are owing money and being crushed in debt because of student loans. Now, is this an own to live move or what? So if you're being crushed by student debt, you have your loans you can't pay, and you need to find some way to do it, and you want to be forgiven for your loans, hey, they've got a job for you over at the ICE, over at the ICE agency, right? $50,000 signing bonus and student loan forgiveness. How is that for some shystiness? But I digress. The main thing here is if anyone wants to ask the question, is Trump a felon? Yes, he is a convicted felon. So why should we be surprised that a felon is doing felon things, right? Well, that's one hell of a rant. I didn't think it would go this long, but there's always so much information to cover, right? So it is shit. It's almost what 2:30, almost 3 o'clock in the morning. So I think I've held everybody up long enough. Did not expect it to go this far, but by all means, if you enjoy what was going on here, please subscribe as well as share the information. I know that I've gotten away from what the true intent of my platform was ideally to speak about relationships, cultures, and things of that nature. But I'm going to make sure I cover everything: facts, and accountability, and historical accuracy is something that is on the plate right now. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about friend zone, body counts, men being leaders, women not wanting to submit, all this typical shit that you see going round and round on platforms. The same discussion with the same folks who will agree one day, then disagree again, and start a whole new conversation. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Hey, good night, Alicia. Speak to you tomorrow or later on today if need be. Time stamping. Maybe I might do something myself. But anywho, again, thank you for staying up this late. For those of you who have been with me, thank you also, Alicia, for sticking by this long. All right, so final thoughts. Like I said, this is a rant, but I have a lot on my mind and there's still more to discuss. So plenty of the, a lot of the information that I mentioned tonight, which is plentiful, will most likely be in its own show coming up here. So I'll drop a few links here and there, but be looking for shows regarding some of the topics that I mentioned tonight. All right. Find somebody who knows somebody, tell somebody about what's going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do, and subscribe if this is what you're looking for. Thank you for sticking in here, folks. I appreciate the late night rant. We'll do this more often. You know what? I kind of like this. All right. Till next time. Take care. Jon H.E.N.R.Y out.